people are here. We have 34 of you on. And I want to welcome you to attending to our backyard wildlife cameras. My name is Margot Rollins, and I am the program coordinator at Sonoma State University's Center for Environmental Inquiry. My colleague at the center, Ben Bravo, our Preserve Resources Manager, is going to be leading today's program. Our public events are usually done either at the Osborne Preserve on Sonoma Mountain in Pengrove or our Galbraith Preserve near Yorkville in Mendocino. And we're all feeling the challenges still of the sheltering in place directive, but we're really happy to be able to reach people in a different way as we have been able to through these virtual series. We usually pass around a sign-in sheet at our events, but in lieu of that, may I ask all of you to please take a minute to put in your full name in the chat box. If you don't want everyone to see it, you can just send it directly to me if you would prefer. You can see that down at the bottom of the chat box where it says to. It can either be everyone or directly to me as you wish. And if you would put that in, that helps us know who was here. We can't necessarily keep track of that. So before I let Ben take it away, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Center for Environmental Inquiry and how we can be a resource to you. You don't need to be affiliated with SSU, or you certainly can be. You can be a student, a parent, a government employee, educator, just a general member of the public, or an organization in need of environmental solutions or looking to partner with us on helping find sustainable solutions. We're building a community of learners and problem solvers across all sectors of society by providing firsthand understanding of our connection with the environment and providing skill-building experiences that result in sustainable solutions. There are many ways to get involved with us. You can engage in some of our research projects. You can participate in our naturalist and land management training programs. We have internships and student jobs. We have events like these that you can attend. You can access our data online. You can lead or contribute to events. And you can partner with us on projects and a lot of other things as well. Today we're going to focus on wildlife cameras for everyday or occasional use by anyone who wants to see what's happening around them when they're not there to witness it. This event has this simple format. Ben is going to talk for about 20 minutes about camera trap settings and model selection. Then he's going to turn the program over to Andy Balestracci. Sorry, Andy, I always mess up your name. I have such an Italian accent in there. Our Galbraith Logistics Manager. Andy will show you some of the videos that he has shot over the past 3 years on the Galbraith Preserve and discuss camera placement to maximize activity. Around 9:35, you will be turned loose and encouraged to go outside and look for a good place to set up a camera, or if you don't have access to an outside place to do that, you can go and look online for some of the camera models that Ben will have discussed with us. You'll have about 10 minutes for this exercise, and then we'll all come back at 9:45 to discuss what you've learned, some of the challenges you may have run into. And then if there's time, Ben's going to take a few minutes to talk about how to identify various animals at night on your photographs. We will officially break up at 10 o'clock sharp, but Ben and Andy have agreed to hang around for an additional 20 to 30 minutes to chat with anyone who wants more information. I have muted you all and turned, so if you can raise your hand by pressing the comment at the bottom, and you can chat in the box if you want to tell us what it is. If you can't hear us or there's some kind of a logistical problem, let me know that. We're going to use the chat feature during the question and answer period, so if you want to put in questions as we're going along, just so that you can actually have access to them as you think of things, we're going to wait and hold the questions until the end. This hour is being recorded, and we will email you when it is available for you to view. It'll be on the YouTube channel. And at the end, Ben's going to put up a slide that has his email, Andy's, and mine, as well as the URL for the Center for Environmental Inquiry, where you will find information on the upcoming as well as the past events. So with that, Ben, and also if you all have something you need to say, you may unmute yourself, but you are all muted at the moment. So Ben, take it away.
All right. Hello, I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Let's see. Sorry. Share screen. All right, can you all see my screen, Margot? It looks good?
Yes.
All right. Hello, my name is Benjamin Bravo. I'm the Preserve Resource Manager for Sonoma State. With me is Andy, the Galbraith Preserve Manager. So today we will be talking about backyard camera traps. So Margot already went over the outline, so I'm going to skip that part. A little bit about me. I help out with the camera trap projects for Galbraith and Osborne Preserves with Sonoma State University. I've used camera traps for my own personal research as an undergraduate and master's student at Stanford University, where I looked at wood rats. I've been part of a few volunteer photo labeling groups at Stanford and other online groups, and I've used camera traps for educational events such as this, where I've taught high school and college students about ecology using camera trap data. So a variety of experiences, all of them are fun, and I really love camera traps. Sorry. Oh, lastly, I use them to see what was causing so much of a ruckus in my backyard. This is this past spring, but apparently it was raccoons. So, camera traps. Let's see if you can, oh, sorry, admit. So this is a camera trap. So camera traps have an infrared sensor right here that allows them to see the movement, allows them to take photos of heated moving objects. So in this diagram, there's a deer walks in front of the camera trap. The sensor tells the rest of the camera to take a photo and use a flash. It's important to note that camera traps are really just a small wedge of the entire environment around them. They only, 30 to 45 degrees, maybe even a little bit more. And so there is a lot they can still miss on the side. So they're really just a small wedge. And then there's a little bit more that's the detection area, and then even smaller that they actually take photos of. Sorry. And so there's a few different types of camera traps. These are just categories that I've kind of made somewhat arbitrarily, or sorry, not arbitrarily, but categories that I've made from looking at different camera trap models that are out there. So the name on top, that's the category that I called it. So, oh, sorry. Someone in the chat. Oh, so anyway. The standard is it's kind of like this one. This is what I'm just calling the generic camera trap. Pretty decent price, something that a lot of us could use. There's some that are cellular. That means they have a cellular connection and they're able to send photos to like your email or to an app. I've explored these a bit, and there's different. Every camera trap seems to be slightly different. I can't say they all send it to a phone app. They send it to a lot of different things. But that's if you want more of a instant information or close to instant information from the camera. There's some that are, I call them research grade. These are ones that researchers sometimes use, and they're pretty much just like the standard camera trap. They're just more expensive, more durable, and sometimes they have faster trigger speed, and they might take better photos. And the last category is one that is not what I would traditionally call a camera trap when I think about it, but this is one that's popped up quite a bit when I type in camera trap, when I look up different types of camera trap options. This is more like a self-assembled system. DSLR is the type of camera, I believe, and they have, there's a bunch of components that are inside these that are already made for us, and it's really easy to use. Some professional photographers, professional wildlife photographers actually have like a high-end camera, a bunch of separate sensors and some flashes, and they have pretty much set up a wildlife studio. But I just have that in there just as a comparison in case anyone's already interested in that kind of thing. But the main type that I use are in the standard, what I call the standard category. So just comparing cameras that are in that category. These are just a few models that I've found. Some of them are ones that I've used. The main thing I want to point out here is what happens with price difference. And if you're looking at a camera trap, you can look at, if you're just looking around on a website, there's a few different things you can look at, but price is definitely going to be a big thing to look at, because maybe some things are outside of your price range or too low. And the second most important thing I would say you should look at is the trigger speed, because this is how long it takes for the camera to trigger after an animal walks in front of it. And 1 second doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you have a moving animal, 1 second makes a big difference. So some of these camera traps that are right around really anything under 0.5 seconds, half a second is really good. But sometimes when you start getting towards ones that are about almost a second, I've used ones that are like a second or 1.2 seconds, and it makes a big difference. You're missing all the good shots. And so I have this up here just to show you sometimes when you, if you are going to buy a camera trap and you buy one that's maybe not one of the common brands, or it's a, I don't know, like this one, for example, is a, it was a part of a set that I got from Big Five, and it was a gift, so I really appreciate it, but it also was, it's a lot slower, and I can tell the difference. There's a lot of shots that I'm missing, or the sensor just doesn't work quite as right. So that's something you are paying for if you are buying one that's closer to the $100 range. You'll get you might get better photos. And then sometimes the detection distance is a little different. Some of the other photo quality might be different. But for me, the biggest difference is the trigger speed, because yeah, that's kind of where you see the price difference. So when you buy a camera trap, you pretty much always need, well, you definitely need batteries. Most of the times you'll need a SD chip. In this camera, it's just in here. Pull it out, just goes into the camera. SDHC is the name that I've seen referenced in some of the manuals. So different camera trap manuals will tell you the maximum size that they can take. So it's just a memory chip. Some models have internal memory, but they're usually not a lot. So in most cases, you'll have to buy a chip to put into your camera. And if you buy one that's 16 or 32 gigabytes, you'll have thousands and thousands of photos. I think I've used as low as 8 gigabytes. You still have many months worth of photos that way. I think photos tend to be about 1 to 2 megabytes, so you can definitely store a few thousand even at the lower sizes. On the right here, I have some other things that are helpful. I just want you to think about them. There are Python locks. So Python locks are if you're worried about your camera trap being stolen. And so some camera trap models, or most of them, have something like this where you can put the Python lock through. And what that allows you to do is to have it strapped to the tree. This somewhat newer model actually has it such that it's attached to the thing that you use to open it, so someone can't actually open in this part, even if it's all locked to the tree. But that's not the case with all camera trap models. Some of the older Bushnells, for example, they have this nice ring in the back that you can put the Python lock through, but someone could still open your camera and take a chip out if you were in a place where there's a lot of people. So sometimes the security case is a nice way to kind of keep the camera contained with a Python lock as well, and so someone can't get that. The security cases are often called bear cases or wildlife cases or something like that, but they're both for human and wildlife. They're made of metal. So those are just some other optional things to consider if you are worried about theft. And then there's a wide variety of mounts. I only have one mount shown here. There's a T-post mount, but they have some that are mounts that you can screw into a tree, and that will allow you to kind of have the camera at a different angle. Now, traditionally, these already have ways to mount them. They have nice grips on the back, and they have these straps, so you don't really need to necessarily buy a separate mount. But if you do want to have it at a certain angle, there's different mounts you can buy to do that. And really quickly about settings. So this is just kind of an overview of a camera trap. I think I've touched on some of this, but they also have, a lot of times they have tripod sockets. Some of them have video microphones for when you have videos. I've already kind of shown you the sensor. There's a few that actually have temperature sensors, light sensors, things like that. And the flash is usually this thing up top, so make sure this is not covered. And some of the most important settings are the mode. So is it video or photo? The image shot, video, photo. I think there's sometimes some of them have a hybrid, like video and photo, but I haven't seen that as often. Image size, so it's usually in megapixels, and this will affect how much your SD card fills up and how quickly it fills up. Interval is the time delay between photos. So I think sometimes it's as low as 5 seconds, but you could put it up to a minute. And so this is if you have something like a site where the animals are collecting a lot and you don't want to take a bunch of photos of the same animals. You can have a very long interval, so that way it takes a minute for it to reset, and it'll only get a few photos in, say, that half-an-hour period instead of getting a lot of photos. And then photo burst is how many photos it takes at once. So I think usually it's 1, 3, and 5 are some of the options. Sometimes they just have 1 and 3. I actually highly recommend putting it on the triple photo, because you'll get the animal as it goes from like the right to the middle to the left of the frame, or left, middle, right. You have a much higher chance of catching the animal. Another really fun thing that you get from this is the movement. So even if it's just it's not a video and you just have the animal kind of walking through, you get that movement, and that kind of, to me, adds an extra fun to the photos. And sometimes you can even see the animal breathing if you have a triple shot photo right in a row, because it takes the 3 photos pretty quickly after each other. I've seen the animal, like, ears moving. There's all kinds of things you can see with that. So that's kind of an extra bonus to using a triple photo setting. It does use up your memory faster, but usually it's worth it. Sensor level, so sometimes it's usually like low, high, and automatic, but not all cameras have the exact same settings. This is mostly the sensitivity of the camera. So if you have a lot of vegetation near your camera, it might trigger it a lot more. You might want to put it on a lower sensitivity setting, but then you might miss out on small animals if you do that. So I usually put it on automatic. Automatic takes some of that into account, and the biggest thing that it helps with is temperature. So if there's a temperature sensor on your camera, it's on the automatic setting. It'll adjust its sensitivity based on the temperature, and that background temperature matters for whether or not the camera triggers. And then timestamp. Timestamp to me is very important from like a researcher, ecologist standpoint, but it could also be important for other people who want to know when these photos were taken. And this is something that I believe is pretty automatic, or included in all cameras. The setting might be on automatically. You should check on that, and it's very useful to have that. General setup. So this is most basic setup recommended by ecologists, or common methods used by ecologists. So half a meter off the ground. This will help you get medium and large animals and still some small animals. And then if you do have the camera, it's best to sometimes have it kind of at an angle, if you're looking at like a trail, to have it slightly at an angle from the trail, so that way you can get kind of the most surface of the trail covered by the photo sensor area. You can have it directly on the trail, directly perpendicular to the trail. You just might get less. And I've even seen some other researchers recommend putting it facing head on to the trail. So this is just kind of a recommendation, but you can set it up kind of however you think would give you the most interesting shots. And you can definitely play around with the settings as well. I set them up recently in my backyard. This is just some photos of that. I got some raccoons messing with things, and the picture on the right is actually a photo taken of one camera trap facing the other camera trap. So I had a camera trap kind of facing my shed to see what was in there at nighttime. But that's kind of a non-standard method. I just wanted to see what was happening. So other suggestions: don't point it at grass or close vegetation. It'll wave in front of your camera and take photos. Don't point it at water. Sometimes that sets it off. You kind of don't want it to be facing the sun, so I think it's recommended to have it facing north when possible, so that way as the sun kind of passes over, it's not shining directly on the camera, because that will set it off, and it will also make the photos really hard to kind of see. When you first set it up, I recommend checking it pretty soon just to see, oh, is it working? How's it going? And then maybe check it monthly, check it every few months. After that, it's not as crucial, but monthly is a decent amount of time to check it unless it's far away and you don't want to check it that often. Bring it in when not in use. This is a really big one. There's kind of a temptation just to leave it out there because it's you don't want to change the settings, or you don't want it to, when you put it back out, you don't want it to be at a different angle. But if you take a photo of how your camera's set up and you write down notes on that, then you should be able to set it up, and leaving it out when it's not in use is a good way for the camera just to take kind of wear and tear without really being used. And make changes when needed, which is kind of the most important suggestion. Let's see. Oh, I will play a video of, let's see. Yeah, a video of my backyard. Okay, let's see. This is my setup video. See if this plays. Oh, where's the sound? All right, we are here in my backyard. Let's see, where can I put a camera? If I want to face the shed, maybe I'd set up a T-post, but I get yard. So this tree looks pretty nice. You can see it's not too thick. If you were to look from the view of this tree, you would see the grass area over there. So that's a pretty good location. All these trees along the side, while they are pretty sturdy and we do have a good view of the grass, getting to the center trunk of the tree would be very difficult. What about over here? We have a nice stump. This could work fairly well. If you were to put one here, you would see the center part of the grass, and that would work well. You can also have another one on these trees. So these trees would be perfect if there was not these tall grass-like plants in front of it. You can put a camera trap here. What it would see would be all this grass, and that would blow in the wind and cause it to take a bunch of false positives. So that's really not what we want. It also takes us away from maybe our target area, which could be the center part of this grass. All right, so let's set up our camera trap. I already have it kind of partially attached, but you want to get it at around knee height, so right around 1.5 feet or so. This is kind of just the generic height for camera traps to get most large and even some small animals. So you want to bring it up and pull the strap tight. You want this to be as perpendicular as it can. Right now you can see my camera is actually leaning back a little bit, but ideally you'd want it to be straight up and down and kind of flat against the tree. And this is so that way the sensor wedge that it can pick up is just straight in front of me. So let me tighten this a little bit more. So there you go. There, the camera trap set up. It's sturdy. You want it to be very sturdy so that way it doesn't fall down. You want the camera trap, and then you also want to check it after you've set it up. So with how I've set it up, it's easy to get access to this, to turn it from off to on, and close this. And there's nothing, notice there's nothing in front of the camera trap really, except for maybe this, which I can angle this that way. There's not much in front of the camera trap. There's nothing that's going to get in the way and trigger it. All right. Hopefully, sorry if there was if the video quality was a little rough. But we will be posting these videos later. If not on YouTube, at least we'll be sending out links to these videos in the future. So that video is mostly just showing you different options. And one thing I wanted to touch on with that is when you do set up your camera trap, look kind of from the camera's perspective to see what the camera might be taking a photo of. That's kind of what I did a few times in that video. It definitely does help kind of wrap your head around what is it that you're going to see. Now we will have Andy. Let's see, I'll unmute Andy. Andy?
All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So my name's Andy Balestracci. I'm a logistics manager at the 3,670-acre Galbraith Wildlands Preserve outside Yorkville, California, in southern Mendocino County. And I just wanted to give a brief overview of sort of a setup in the field that we've had for the last 3 years. We've had a number of different camera sites on the preserve, but this one in particular has been really interesting and really active. So I just wanted to show that. If Ben could cue that.
Yes. Sorry, I think there's a... Oh, there we go. Can you hear the audio?
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how do we choose a site that's optimum for in the wild. This is a site that's up on the Galbraith Wildlands Preserve. This camera's been at this site for 3 years now. And I just wanted to talk about why I chose the site originally. You can see the camera is on a pretty slender Douglas fir sapling. That was just because it happens to be at a site that was ideal for viewing that, which is an older Douglas fir. It's been used as a marking tree, a scratching tree by pigs, feral pigs, for years probably. You can see how much it's worn away. Those marks are from the pigs using their tusks to wound the tree. You can see all the sap running down, but this is like a really active site. A lot of the pigs come through here. It's the dominant animal on this camera. But it's not the only one, and certainly other animals are coming around because they're interested in the pig as food. But there also happens to be a water source close by. So that's key too. If you've got a water source on your property throughout the summer and year round, animals are going to come and be drawn to that. So it's a water source. It's a tree that's already been known that the pigs are visiting. And then another thing to look for is on your property or elsewhere, if you can see animal trails. You can see that faint track. So it's something that the animals are using to move about their territory. Continues here. So it's a couple of different little tricks that just would improve chances of getting animals on your cameras rather than just a sort of haphazard placement.
Is the video still playing? I don't know if there's a delay.
One other thing to remember, it's 30%. There's that particular camera, there's a feature that shows percentage of charge. I can't tell how frustrating that is if you come on your batteries often, and also remember to reset your time and date. It usually, once you change batteries, a lot of models go back to a default. So you want to make sure you change that every time you change the batteries. So hopefully we can show some of the videos from this camera. It's always a very active site. It's a lot of fun to see the images that come from here. So yeah, so thank you. Sorry folks, the video and the audio was a little choppy for me. I don't know if that was true for everybody. But like Margot's mentioned, we'll post this online at some point in the near future, so you can watch those. We've got some other video, a compilation that is from this site, which you'll recognize in some of the photos with the tree, which is pretty characteristic. And then also one other site on the preserve that's also happens to be by a water source. So while that's still loading, there we go. So yeah, I think the video and the audio was a little choppy on that, but like I said, we can maybe play that back, or you can watch it when we post it online. So one thing that I would, when you're choosing a site on your property, you know your property best. When you take a walk around, which we encourage people to do here in a little bit, but also when just go for walks, looking for animal trails, which are usually a practical way to get through the landscape, because they're, especially if it's hill country or steep terrain, they're going to be choosing trails that are the easiest way from point A to point B. So that's another helpful way to use that as a way to choose a site for your camera. I would recommend, the highest resolution setting you can get on your trail camera. And And if you think you can check your camera often, I would go for the video, longest video, like on some of our cameras, it's 20 seconds. It's amazing the amount of behavior you can capture, and really interesting to see. So part of the other reason we have cameras up there is I'm often up there solo, and it's also a good way, also on your property, if it's rural property, to get an idea of the large mammals that might be up and around, to know if there's a mountain lion or a bear that's birthed cubs. It's always a good tool to know that they're in the area, and to kind of give them a wide berth. Another interesting thing is Ben's mentioned with the camera placements. You know, a lot of these models, they already come camouflaged, camouflage coloring. It's amazing how animals can pick up that something is different in the landscape. I've had animals, particularly coyotes, that will pick up, you'll see them walk into view, they catch sight, they actually catch sight of the camera trap, and they know something's different. They'll turn around. They'll just do a 180 and head in the opposite direction. You can also see behaviors that are, you know, we're all creatures have a habit. Some are more than others. For instance, foxes. You could almost set a clock to the foxes, if you have one in your neighborhood, with their behavior. They'll seem to reappear every night at roughly the same time. It's amazing. So I think that's all I have to say. Like I said, we'll be around for questions afterwards too. I'd love to answer any questions after. So with that, I'll give it back to Ben.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. And so I also want to note that the great shots that we got from that, from Galbraith, were because of Andy's 3 or more years of hard work on the Galbraith camera trap project. So it does take a good amount of work to get all of those really nice shots. And thank you very much, Andy, for working so much on this project. So now we're going to have our break for our activity relating to camera trap setup and camera traps in general. So we're going to have about 10 minutes. Let's see, what time is it? Or about 7 minutes. But we can probably take 10 minutes. So we'll go until 9:48. So look at maybe different places you want to set up your cameras. And so you can do this by just walking around areas near your house or on your property, or if you already have any locations, just kind of keep those in mind. If you are able to get to those places within that 10 minutes, I consider taking a photo, like from the camera's perspective, to get an idea of what it looks like for the camera to be set up there. This is especially important. I don't know if you saw in at the end of my video, the photos, the camera was angled up, so I didn't get the grass part at all. I was missing about the bottom 1 foot, and that's actually a good demonstration of what happens if the camera's at an angle. And the second option is just look at TrailCam Pro's website, or look at any other websites. You can look at Amazon, or can type into just Google camera traps, see what's out there. And so when we come back in a little less than 10 minutes, come back with questions about different models. There's so many models to explore. One of the reasons why I have TrailCam Pro's website out there is because they've actually, they're not a camera trap producer. They've compared a bunch of different camera trap models, and they look at their trigger speed, the cost, they look at everything, and they make an index out of it. So they're a good website to consider, just to kind of get an idea of where to start. And if you go to their website, and you go to Trail Cam Selection Guide, you can kind of get started with that, and it'll take you through a few different things. It'll walk you through a few different options, and that's kind of a good way to start if you're not sure. All right, so I guess we'll take that break now. I'll still be here, maybe to answer any other questions, but we'll come back at 9:48. 9:48. Oh, got a question. Oh, I'll stop screen share.
Great. Thank you, Ben. We'll see you all back here in a few minutes, 10 minutes.
All right.
I turned everyone's cameras off
That's good.
in hopes that that would help with the quality, but
Cool.
when we come back, Ben, if you have time, I mean, I assume that there'll be a lot of questions, but perhaps not, to talk about some of the different things that people might want to do with, they might want to look at. We talked about it. You talked about the raccoons. And
I imagine people will come with their questions, and I'll be able to answer those questions. So it's really what they are interested in looking at, and that shapes the methods, or that modifies the methods. So if they are interested in looking at deer, or interested in looking at, that modifies the method that they would use. So I would look at each individual person, or each person can ask questions, and we can answer those. We do have time built into this event for them to do that, and there's more questions at the end. But yeah.
It isn't so much a matter of questions. It's a matter of giving people an idea of there may be something different that they could be using it for than, and I don't know exactly. I mean, people may be just wanting to do it to see who's, as you said in your case, see who's in there rummaging through their storage room. There's also a lot of other things that they can.
Yeah, and they can ask about those things, and we can also let's see. Anytime they want to watch animals, but they can use it for hunting if they wanted to. I'm not a hunter, so I don't have really as much experience with that. But anytime they want to watch wildlife, they can use it for that. And then if they have more questions, I can address specific methods, differences they might want to use, specific to their use. So I assume that I hope that they will bring questions, and that way it's more direct. Kind of one reason why I don't start listing off a bunch of different methods, because once you start deviating from a certain set, you might start running into problems with photo quality, or you might have it be triggered by something like, I don't recommend people pointing them at a grassland because it'll set it off. So if someone wanted to monitor a grassland, I would say, you might have to do a few things differently. Let's see. Did someone ask a question?
Well, I asked people to let us know what they were thinking about using it for.
Oh, great. Yeah. That'll be very helpful.
So Maricela de Santa Ana, who's on this, she runs the Willits Bypass project, reclamation project in Willits.
Reconics, yeah, those are the high-end ones. Yeah, that's great. Do the cameras record onto SD cards?
Yeah, we can talk about that more.
Yeah. And one thing, Ben, that you and I talked about, and Andy the other day, is the trigger speed.
Yes.
Well, you did talk about that. Never mind.
I did. Yeah,
Never mind.
it makes
you did talk about it. Never mind.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the problems that we have. It just seems to be slow.
Fast mice or very slow mice?
Yeah. There's some of those rabbits, when they jump, they just become this blur. They get airborne. It's amazing how airborne those animals, some of the little small ones, can get. And I didn't even really talk about it that much, but camera traps are not, the basic method is not the best for rodents. It's really hard to get, if you have like 5 or 6 different rodent species, to identify them too well from camera traps. You'd have to kind of put it closer and stuff. Maybe modify it.
My mice are clearly mice.
Yeah. The Osborne Preserve, I think we have dusky-footed wood rats up there, but when I did my work on wood rats, there was also California mice, and it was really hard for me to tell them apart. And I don't know, hopefully it didn't ruin my data if it's all California mice, but I was pretty sure the wood rats is chunky rats and the mice are little tiny jumping things, so they look a little different. Intrusive cameras are for breeding birds. Oh.
That's a good question.
I don't know that. It's a good question. I actually don't know that one.
Oh, that's a Mary Salas question,
Yeah.
You
know, I've been noticing now that I think about it, with some of the cameras like at False Loop and Meadow Pond site, I wonder if the shutter speed is, such that I've gotten frustrated because some of the mountain lion videos are choppy, or it starts at a regular speed and then it gets choppy and then it resumes speed. I'm wondering if they're moving slow enough that it's interrupting the trigger, or if it's, I'm not sure.
Could be, I think it's kind of like a glitch or something. I know I saw that too in the videos. I don't think it's the trigger itself, because that's just a simple action. I think it's just like trigger, take photo. I think it could be the recording, a glitch, or if it's filling. I don't know if you notice if it happens when it's filling up, if it's towards the end when it's filling up, or if it.
Yeah, I wonder.
It could even be a battery.
Ben, let's get back.
Oh,
People
yeah.
are starting to have quite a few questions here, and I think
all right.
interested in your conversation too.
All right, we'll get back. It's right around 9:49.
Would you also, if you wish to unmute yourself, I'm going to leave you all muted, but you can unmute yourself, and you also can turn on your video if you'd like.
Let's see.
Take it away, Ben.
I wonder which one is the first question. Let's see. I'm looking through.
For a question.
I think it starts with maybe Beth Lamb's question, or she asked me how to get rid of red eye. But maybe there's.
What time is that one? There's one here that's at 9:45.
9:45. Oh yeah. Do these cameras record onto SD cards for what format? Yeah, they record onto these chips. SD cards. SDHC is just an SD card. I think it's just the newer version of it. So I have a SD chip, and the camera videos, I think they're like MP4. MP4, and then the photos, I believe, are JPEG, something like that, and they're pretty easy to move around. I think the photos are right around 1 or 2 megabytes. That's
yeah, if I can say something about the SD cards, if we have a number of cameras in the field, I'll carry around extra SD cards, and I usually check the cameras at least once a month. So I'll go with extra cards. I'll pull the SD card. It's just a regular SD card. I usually use the 32 megabyte card, and that's video and still images. I can just download those right to my computer. It's always really fun to see what comes up. You never know what comes up. It's always kind of a mystery. But yes, SD cards. So you might want to have, if it's in your own yard and you're checking it often, you could probably just have one card and take it out of the camera, check it, put it right back in. If I could just say one quick thing about, I don't know if someone else has, I can use this question about the animals detecting the camera. Smell is a big thing. So if you're checking your camera often, just touching the camera, you're going to leave your scent on the camera, and it may affect animal behavior, either scaring animals away. So be aware of that. Either wear gloves or try and check the camera as little as possible to avoid that.
I think, let me scroll down. I think the next one is, I want to know about the intrusive cameras, how intrusive cameras are for breeding birds. Love to put a camera on nesting raptors like red-shouldered or white-tailed kites. I haven't actually done much work on birds, but if you want to get the least intrusive camera, you would want one that's the lowest flash. So that would be, there's really advertised as two different kinds, like standard and then like low glow. But the Trail Cam Pro people have actually divided low glow into two categories. There's one that are like, and they call it like a black light or like very dark, or the actual low glow. And there's some that emit a slight red light when they take a photo. So in general, if you want to have the least effect on the wildlife, it's best to get those. And so change the flash. They all, some of them make noise, so that's kind of an unfortunate side effect, and they won't tell you that on their website. Some of that you might have to learn from playing with different models, but generally the ones that are not like the cheapest ones, like not ones that are some random company, because even these ones, I could tell these ones make some noise, but some of the Bushnell ones might make a little bit less. There are some, I think there's a few papers people have written on possibly what animals can hear what, but I think it's still something that's being researched. There's a lot of people trying to figure out, a lot of people really love camera traps, but how effective are they? Are there downsides to them? So I don't have a list off the top of my head of which ones are the most affected, but from anecdotally, there are some animals who look directly at the camera in a way that almost indicates they might notice that it's there. And as Andy said, smell is a factor too. And new things in your environment are a factor. Let's see. What's the next
Ben,
one?
could I add something a little?
Oh, yes.
So I haven't tried, Maricela has a question about the bird cameras on bird nests. I haven't tried that, but again, another strategy would be if you know if there's a past nesting site from a past year, set up the camera outside of the breeding time or the nesting time of the year and allow the birds to get completely used to it, to think that it's just part of the landscape. That might mean having to leave the camera at the site and not checking it for the whole time that the birds are nesting and the chicks are fledging. Yeah, and as far as the red glow, low glow, or white flash, I mean, a lot of the old trail cameras actually used to have a flash bulb that was very intrusive with animals. A lot of times you'd see, you'd get a shot of a deer in mid-flight because they're so, the reaction time is so quick. Many of the cameras don't have a flash anymore, but some of them still do have a red glow. And I know there's research and there are products out there that actually use a red glow to mimic, for a lot of predator species, a red glow is the reflection off a light of eyes of a predator. So it will scare animals away, thinking that it's that. So do your homework when you're researching what kind of camera you want.
I think let's see how much time. We have time for, I'll answer the next question, and then I think we might save the rest for the after the next part, after the conclusion. So the next one is, I would like a faster camera to capture vehicles. My back road. I now have a Bushnell Trophy Cam HD Aggressor, which shutter speed gives specification to look at in selecting camera. So this is actually, I believe they call it trigger speed. So trigger is the time it takes for the camera, the sensor, to tell the camera to take a photo. Shutter speed, I believe, is usually just the lens itself, how long the lens is open for. So I think but I know the Aggressor, I think, has a pretty fast trigger speed. And some of that, you could, if it's not in the manual itself for the Aggressor, you could look on TrailCam Pro, maybe type in Aggressor into their search and see what it is. But I believe Aggressor is pretty fast. It's probably pretty close to the 0.2. There's not too many cameras that are much faster than a 0.2 or 0.15 that I know of. So it's pretty fast. You can get some pretty fast ones that are still kind of with under 200 or right around there. But yeah, I think Aggressor is fairly quick. So now we'll have, let's see how much time. I'll spend about a minute going through brief camera trap tips, tips for labeling, identifying wildlife. And so, screen share. All right, so really briefly, these are some tips. So you want to know your background scene. This is kind of part of the reason why I said you should take a photo of what you're looking at. But when you start getting some of those photos, hopefully you'll have some blank ones that'll help you get an idea of the background. You want to know what it looks like when the animal's in motion. You want to look for the eyes. This is mostly a nighttime feature. So these tips apply to day and night, so it's not just nighttime, but at night specifically the eyes pop out a lot more. They're a white dot. Look towards the center of the photo. Look for the height and the scale of the animal. This makes a difference. Species-specific traits, and then fur texture and color. So I'm going to touch on these real briefly in the next few slides. So know your scene. Mostly look for things like rocks, logs, other vegetation. Especially at nighttime, some shapes, if you've been looking at photos for a while, your eyes can play tricks on you and you think, was that rock there? I don't remember if that's a rock. It's like, no, that's a rabbit. But yeah, so look for different things in your background. As you can see from all of these different scenes from Osborne, there are some rocks, there are some logs. Sometimes you might have a tree fall down. So kind of just keep track of that. If you have multiple cameras from different sites, I recommend labeling one site at a time so your eye gets trained to see what it looks like when there's nothing in the background. Motion's a big one. Again, the triple shot. I kind of touched on this earlier, but it's really helpful to see the animal when it's not blurred and then when it blurs. And after if you have it on triple shot, maybe you have one good photo where it's not blurred, and then you have the blurred ones. Eventually, you'll be able to make that connection. You're like, oh, this is what a coyote looks like when it blurs. So then all those other blurs that you'll see later, it's like, oh, that's a coyote. I know that's a coyote. You might still have a lot of photos you can't use that aren't as nice, but at least you know what it is. The size matters. Oh, and lastly, if you are interested in sharing any of your work, any of your photos, iNaturalist, and you are familiar with iNaturalist, iNaturalist actually has a camera trap project that's only camera trap photos. So you can see what other camera trap photos people have from the area. And if you have a photo you're not sure of, you can upload it to that and people can help you identify it, which is really nice.
Ben, I'm gonna cut you off, Ben. It's 10 o'clock, and we need to let people go. I have just a minute of wrap up. Can you throw up that last slide that you and I talked about with web addresses and emails?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ben's going to stay on. He has a few more things he wanted to share with you. So for those of you who can stay, please do. I wanted to thank everybody for coming, and I hope you all learned a lot as I did. I'm very interested in this topic. And please feel free to email Ben, Andy, or me about any questions that you might have. And I want to invite you all to send any photos or videos that you take after this session to us, and we'll put them in our anthology of outcomes from our series, and perhaps put some up on our Facebook page. This is one of the last in the series of over 24 events we've done this spring, and we have more coming. So please, if you check out the Center for Environmental Inquiry's website, which is cei.sonoma.edu, and look at the calendar, and you'll see some of them. The two of them that we have coming up, we have a nature photography one on May 22nd at 10, and a nature storytelling one on May 29th at 2. So do check out our website, cei.sonoma.edu, for more information and to register. Thank you all very much for joining us. Stay safe and hang on if you want to enjoy some more of the information from Andy and Ben.
All right. So I'm just looking through the chat. So that was all I had for my presentation. Initially, I did have a lot more in-depth walking through photo identification for each species, but these are now handouts. So hopefully you all were able to receive an email that had a PDF document that walked through some comparisons between like fox and coyotes and things like that. So am I muted? All right.
Did you see the question, Ben, about what about using a GoPro for birds?
Yeah, I'm right at the Julie Whitman's question. So I'm going in order. So this one I kind of touched on before. Other than coyotes, which animals can detect the cameras, which cannot? As we said earlier, I would say I don't think there's necessarily definite answers for that, but there are some papers. And Julie, if you're interested, I could send you those papers. I know you've done ecology research, and you might be interested in those papers specifically. Low glow versus no glow. Oh, great. The question about low glow versus no glow effect on animals. That's a good question. No glow was the word that I was searching for earlier that I forgot to mention. No glow is the one that would have the least effect. And that is something that, since I've only really used probably low glow cameras, I don't have personal experience with no glow, but again, I think researchers are looking into that to see how much effect they have on animals. When you have a piece of land, every animal species and has a different audio and visual detection range, so it's kind of tricky to say which ones can or can't. Also, we have not been able to get any weasels or other mink types.
I think she means on her camera.
Oh, on her camera. If you have species that are smaller, you can actually set the cameras lower. I did that for my wood rat research. I actually had them much lower than the 1.5-foot method that I talked about earlier. So you can set them lower. You can even have multiple cameras at the same site if you want. Have one at the standard height and have one very low and see what the differences. Another question, do the cameras make a sound that might scare the animals? Yes, that's a good question. They do make sounds, and kind of all relating to the same general trend. Do they affect the animals? It's definitely a possibility. Some of them you can hear the sound. If you're playing with the camera, you can actually hear the camera make a sound, so that's not great. But I believe the TrailCam Pro website might touch on some of the sound as well. Sorry, I'm going through these fast. Yeah, let's see. Best type for night photography, red glow, low glow, or white flash? I actually think white flash is probably the best for night photography, but you are going to have the highest chance of scaring the animals. So kind of a fun anecdote, I actually, when I was doing my own work, I blocked off the flash to see what would happen. This was way back when I was undergrad, and the photos were very, very bad quality. So there is a trade-off between how bright, because you need flash to have a nice, well-defined photo, versus how much effect you are going to have on the animals. So as Andy said earlier, they used to have a lot more white flash in cameras, and those would scare the animals. Even that DSLR setup that I talked about, where someone buys all these things separately, those are big flashes, and these nature photographers who maybe want these amazing shots of animals, they are going to have this huge flash, and it could scare animals, but you might get a really nice photo. So it's a it's a trade-off. Andy, do you have anything else you want to add to that question?
No. Let's keep moving. There's a question about SD card reader, and I'll just add. You know, I don't know if you can see that. I have a small card reader that takes also the regular SD card and also the micro SD card, and it has 2 different plugins. You know, either a USD or I'm not sure what the other one is called, but that works great to just a micro, yeah. So you can just plug in the SD card and then plug that whole thing right into your computer, and it'll show up either as a JPEG or MPEG. And
some computers have an SD card reader already on them. I know mine definitely does, but not all of them do. If you're someone who is going out into the field and you want to check the cameras without having to bring your computer out there, they do make separate devices, but they cost like $50 or more. They're little like viewers. I've even seen one. I haven't used it. I almost wanted to buy it. It's a SD card reader that plugs into your phone. So if you have your cell phone out there, I think this one's cheaper than 50. Maybe it was closer to 20. If you have your cell phone out there and you want to check to see what things look like, you can plug that into your phone. But there's a few options.
There's a question about managing the files.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. How do you manage the files? Do they take up a lot of memory on your computer? They definitely can. So I think about 1,000 photos gets closer to a gigabyte or so, maybe a little more. They do take up a lot of space. We have a lot of external drives that we have. But really, if you have the cameras out for not too long, they won't take up a lot of space, and you can save some and delete some if you're not using it for research. Save the best ones, delete all the empty ones, because you'll probably have a fair amount of empty ones. Even if you use really good methods, you'll get some empty ones. So delete all those if you're not using them for anything, and possibly consider getting an external drive. But if your computer has some memory, it'll be fine. Really, we only see huge memory situations if it's been going on for many years, or if you're using video. Right, Andy? The videos.
Definitely.
But they're so nice though. So I actually really like the videos too. So it's a trade-off. Let's see. What about GoPro for birds? What about using a GoPro for birds? I'm not sure. I don't have experience with GoPros, but
I haven't tried it.
It's a different setup. I think the one advantage to camera traps is they only really take when there's movement. Even if there's vegetation movement, they're not on all the time. So that's one benefit. But I know the GoPros are really nice high-end photography cameras. So that's kind of a trade-off. Some people use camera traps in conjunction with something else. So it's even possible if you have a camera trap, you have a GoPro, set the camera trap up, tells you maybe when things are active, and then you put the GoPro out only for when the camera trap indicated things tended to be active. Thank you so much. How easy is it to change locations if you want to try a couple different locations? Thank you for a great presentation. So Stephen Gold, it's about as easy as just unclipping it and moving it to somewhere else. I always recommend just taking notes somewhere when you do that, so that way you know for your own records that it was a change. Possibly even downloading stuff from that card, the SD chip. Download stuff, delete it, and start with a fresh chip when you move locations. But that's kind of a recommendation, and if you're very familiar with what things look like, you might not even need to do that. and also make sure it's off and stuff when you transfer it to locations. Can they be stored on the cloud? They definitely can be stored on the cloud. I don't think there's cameras that send it directly to the cloud that I know of, but you just have to upload them yourself to the cloud when you save them. If you are interested, I didn't really talk about it that much on cameras that are wireless that send photos. Those don't upload directly to a cloud. They send it to your email or to an app. But that does have some instant sending capabilities.
I think I'd still recommend archiving things, multiple spots, because, whether it's an external hard drive in addition to the cloud, or particularly if it's a long-term project, like I think Maricela has been doing, having backup is good, because I have lost some because they've either gotten overwritten or erased by accident. So having multiple backups is good.
All right, I think we've gotten to the end of the questions. Does anybody else have more questions? Especially if anyone has a specific use they're interested in. So we've had some really great questions about birds, which is something that's not as commonly photographed with camera traps. So I'm really happy to hear those questions.
There's more of a comment here. It's kind of interesting. I've seen some great photos of bears from a front door camera-like nest.
Oh yeah.
Because then you're getting real-time. I think what I've used with those, not for wildlife photo captures, but on houses, it's a real-time notification. If you have a bear that's by your house, and there's also the audio microphone that you could use to scare it away or talk to it, whatever you want to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's funny. That's things going the opposite direction. A wildlife interacting with a home security camera. So that's really interesting. Those cameras do require, I think, a really strong internet connection to work. But if you already have one and you're in an area that has bears, that'd be interesting.
Ben, one of the things you alluded to, I think, was false positives, and I know you talked about this in your other program a little bit. When you did your other, and I think, yes, placement is one thing. Are there other things people can do to avoid all the false positives?
Yeah, so I think I have some. I can scroll back. All the suggestions I said in the other suggestions, a lot of these actually were for false positives. So don't point it at the water. The sun will cause false positives because of the heat. And check it monthly. This is actually, it's not specifically for false positives. It's good to check just for general maintenance. But the more frequently you check it, the more you'll be able to see, oh, is there grass that's causing a false positive? Even I think in the best setups, you're going to get a few false positives. But really, if you want to get photos of wildlife near a grassland, don't point it directly at the grass. Just attach it to a tree near the grassland, but don't face the grass. Really, grass is probably the worst for camera trap photos, false positives. And I didn't mention this earlier, but clearings tend to be a common thing. Trails are kind of like a small clearing. That works out well. But thinking back to all the camera trap projects I've been part of and what methods I've seen people use, everything the cameras are set up next to is somewhat of a clearing. Even the Galbraith one is a fairly open space. All the Osborne cameras, they're not right in the middle of a dense forest. They're actually in maybe a small clearing in a possibly dense forest, but it's still kind of open. So put things in somewhat open places. This will help with false positives and help you get better photos. That's all I can think of. You're going to have false positives no matter what, but avoiding grass will prevent the really, really bad ones, the terrible ones that just like crash your camera. Yeah, those aren't good.
Yeah, great.
Oh, this one says, I got a question. Do flashes go off only at night? Yes. The cameras actually have this interesting feature where I think they switch over. They switch over from day and night time. The type of photo it takes switches as it goes to black and white versus kind of a color photo. So they don't really take color photos at night because the camera does something different internally. And part of that too is flashes. They don't really take flashes. Oh, they don't take flashes during the day. But there are interesting times where it's close to sunrise or sunset where the camera's kind of in this in between, and you might look at some photos and it's a daytime view and then it goes to a nighttime setting. Yeah.
There's a question. I'm concerned that I'd be taking a picture of me in my garden all day. Is there a way to time the camera so it only triggers at night?
Some cameras do have that setting, but not all of them. These ones definitely don't, but I think some of the slightly more expensive ones might. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones do, but you'd have to kind of look at that, look under the settings, and see if there's a way to set it.
Some of the ones we
I'm sorry.
Some of the ones we've been using, there's just an on-off switch. I mean, if you are really concerned about that, you'd actually have to conscientiously go in, open up the camera, turn it off during the day, and then go back and turn it on at night. But the sort of mid-range, as far as price cameras, it's either an on-off switch. I don't think you can program it to just come on a timer necessarily, although that would be a really interesting feature to have on them.
Yeah, I think I saw it with some of the remote cameras I was looking at, but I don't think it's that many of them. I think it was cutting back. Some of their wireless cameras had that setting, but I don't think it's too common.
Right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That would be really nice though. The ones at Osborne. There's actually a camera at Osborne that's set to only nighttime, and I think it was a Bushnell camera. I know because I've been looking through a lot of the photos, and Chris was telling me about it, so I think it is. But yeah, it really depends on your model, so it's not all of them. Email through email later. Okay. Anyone else have questions?
It looks like we've answered most of the questions.
I think everyone's saying thank you.
Ben and Andy.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think everyone's done. If not, shout quickly before we close the door. Thank you all. Great job, guys. And get out there and take lots of pictures, everybody. Bye.
Let me